We are in chapter 6, where Bhagwan has made out a very strong case in favor of Dhyan Yoga. And he makes a convincing case for it as we proceed. How does anyone, whether a yogi or not, how does one understand one's own true identity? What is that? So in Karma Yoga, it was said, you can understand your identity first of all if you do the sadhana of Karma Yoga, which means to drive away that selfish aham and mamatva identity from yourself, that selfishness, that ego which attaches. Once it is driven away, what will be revealed will be the substratum on which everything rests. Our entire existence rests on the substratum of consciousness. And therefore, when the covering, that selfishness covering, is removed, even in Karma Yoga, maybe that substratum consciousness can be revealed. But it's much harder because karma is involving ourselves wholeheartedly in the world, and the world has a lot of distractions. So Karma Yoga may not be the best possible route. And therefore, in Dhyan, there are two things that are expected to happen. One, when the mind in any case is chanchalam, dridham, and it is as if it is blown hither and thither by the storm, by the wind on the ocean, and like a rudderless boat, it seems to just swing with the wind. We first need to empty that mind. And in Buddhism, they say that emptying the mind is itself the goal. But in Vedanta, it is said, oh, once you empty it, your true astitva, your identity is not shunya. It is not a zero. It is not a sifir. It is something beyond that. And therefore, once you become a zero, a shunya, an emptiness of silence, of stillness in Dhyan, then it is possible to focus on who am I, that consciousness, that awareness. And if it is Bhakti Yoga, then in Bhakti Yoga you focus on your Ishta Devata. It could be Krishna or Shiva or Ram, your Ishta Devata. So there is a focus in Bhakti Yoga, and there is a focus of who am I? What is this consciousness, this vast, infinite, eternal presence? In Gyan Yoga, you focus on that, and that is your self. So the capital S, the self. So that self can be focused on only when there is silence and stillness. So the whole fundamental principle of Dhyan is this, simply 2 steps. Empty the noise, still the noise, and focus on that truth. To know that truth, we first of all have to have Gyan, right? So that's why in chapter 2, Krishna had introduced the entire philosophy of Gyan. Who am I? What is consciousness? What are you mortal? What is immortality? All that was already introduced in the very first chapter. And it was in answer to what? In answer to Arjun saying, Krishna, please help me. I am deluded by my moha, by my attachment to my gurus and my cousins and my teachers and my grandparents who are facing me on the other side. And the answer is, first, no Gyan. What a strange answer. Krishna did not give a direct answer about moha and delusion, but he gave the very secret of what causes delusion and why we are deluded. Because we don't know our true identity, and therefore identifying with all the relationships of the world, my father, my grandfather, my cousins, that's what Arjun is saying, my teacher, how can I kill them? All these relationships that we identify with, we are identifying only through the medium of our body. The interaction is taking place through our minds or our intellect. And therefore, the very body, mind, intellect, if it is negated as not the true self, as Nashvar, as Anitya, then what of the relationships? Then the relationships themselves are also Anitya, and also they are Maya. They are riding on an Asat. If the body, mind and intellect are Asat, so are all the interactions that we conduct through our body, mind and intellect. All that was already revealed, but we do not have a focus on it, a dhyan on it, an abidance in that truth, a stillness and holding on, abidance, holding on, that is our difficulty. Just knowing Gyan verbally is not enough, and therefore Dhyan Yoga is introduced by Krishna. And therefore, the whole purpose of Dhyan being um, to know our entire totality, to know our pure consciousness, that is our tattva, our very basis. And what does Dhyan do? We can merge with that totality only in two cases. With that eternal totality, we merge only when our body drops. That is when we are dead. Or in deep Dhyan, when our awareness of this body drops. In very, very deep Dhyan, we are not aware of this body, this mind, that intellect. We have gone beyond that. So the awareness of this body drops. That's also when we merge. We have the potential to merge with that infinite consciousness, Tattva, Paramatma, which is the nature of the self. What do we mean by the self? When we say Paramatma, it is not a Dvait philosophy of God and me as separate, as Tattva and my Atma as separate. Yes, Atma is manifesting itself in conjunction with the body, mind, intellect for a brief period of this life which we call our life, the duration. But otherwise the Tattva is the same. For example, we take a bucket and we dip it in the ocean. We bring out the bucket from the ocean filled with water. And hey, what does the bucket say? The bucket says, I am an individual. My water is different from the ocean. I am an individual liquid, whatever that liquid. But the fact is that if you throw that water right back into the ocean, it is still not a separate thing. It is merging completely with its own tattva. Look at it any which way you like. This tattva cannot be different from the consciousness which makes us aware of this entire world. For example, this whole body mind, if you can look at it clinically, surgically, cut it up, can we locate the point at which awareness exists? Where is awareness? Is it in the mind? Is it in the buddhi? Is it in the heart? Is it in the liver, in the kidneys? Where is awareness? It cannot be located because it's pervading every cell of the body. And therefore it is pervading also every cell of everybody else's bodies, all other creatures. And this awareness is what we are. How? Now the whole topic of Dhyan Yoga is nothing but abiding in this understanding, just an abidance. If my mind is unsettled and it is racing out into my little small objectives, because right through my life I have had small objectives facing me and they're so close to me, these small goals, that I cannot see beyond it. For example, when I was 15, it was my board exams facing me right there. So, and because it's so close, that goal obscured my view of anything beyond, of anything larger, of anything of greater significance. And therefore, at every stage there has been some goal or the other which obscures the view, and we are only focused on that small goal. So I had these board exams to face, and then I had college admissions, and that was another struggle altogether, and then the college clearing the exams. Then of course in between there was all this building a social circle, picking up all kinds of hobbies, and then it was there are people who want to settle down, so marriage becomes their immediate goal after their professions. Oh yes, after that job hunting. These goals are real. If we are living in the sansar, I'm not discounting them at all. They are real, but they are not large enough for us to obscure our view of the larger goal. That's the only thing. And then there is marriage, and once this marriage thing gets over, then we are looking at growing a family. Once the family grows up, then their education, and then their board exams, and then their college, and this cycle goes on and on and on. Tell me, right through our lives, more than 50%, 60% of our lives are gone. Have we looked beyond these small goals? And of course we have achieved them well, settling down, settling the kids well, and then the property and enough wealth and security. And if we look back with satisfaction and say, yes, I have done well. Yes, we have done well in the sansaric perspective. But because these goals at every stage were facing us point blank in our face, we did not look beyond. And therefore, these goals have actually taken precedence and life has been lost only in that. They need to be done. We are in sansar, but that's not the only aim. And Arjun, having understood this, in the 33rd verse, he says, chapter 6, verse 33, Arjuna Uvacha योऽयं योगस्त्वया प्रोक्तः साम्येन मधुसूदन एतस्याहं न पश्यामि चञ्चलत्वात् स्थितिं स्थिराम्. He said, yes, with so many small goals facing me, this war, I have to be a good warrior, then I have to bring up a family and then train my own children into being a Kshatriya. Everyone, whether you're a Kshatriya or a Brahman or a Vaishya or a businessman or an engineer or a professional, everyone has these goals facing them. Therefore, Arjun is saying, this yoga of equanimity, Krishna, the yoga of equanimity which you are teaching me, oh Madhusudana, I don't see it happening as a continuous part of my swabhav. Equanimity I don't see it happening because of the restlessness of the mind. And then verse 34, he said, why? Because chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramathi balavadridham tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudoshkaram. Because the mind has three qualities which are inherent. It is the nature of mind. It's not my nature, remember. It is the nature of my mind to be chanchal, turbulent, to be pramathi, that is also turbulent, balavad, strong, so that something that overwhelms my mind as a desire and my mind starts chasing it, it just overwhelms even my wiser counsels. If my buddhi says no, this is not right at the moment, you have a larger goal to achieve, the mind is so obstinate, dridham, that it refuses to drop that desire to which it latches on. Bas ye chahiye hi, like a spoiled child. Dridham, obstinate mind. Now if this is the nature of my mind, to peel away from my mind is very tough. Krishna has already reminded him in the past, this may be the nature of your mind, Arjun. This is not your inherent nature. It is not your swabhav. So, we are becoming slaves to the mind. And the mind is a slave of the senses. And the senses are only chasing the objects, desirable objects of the world. So, this world which is made up of jad, sthula vastu, the material world, is actually dictating who we are. That doesn't seem to sound like a very intelligent way to lead life. And therefore he says, I can't help it. I don't see this equanimity thing happening, Krishna, which you're talking about. Because my mind is dridham, pramathi and balavad, very, very strong. And that applies to all of us. So Bhagwan very compassionately, he gives an answer. And that is in number 35. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha असंशयं महाबाहो मनोदुर्निग्रहं चलम् अभ्यासेन तु कौन्तेय वैराग्येन च गृह्यते. I can give you only 2 tips, hey Arjun, and the 2 tips are that when the mind, like a wild horse, runs amok, what do? You train your horse, right? So you're going to train the mind with 2 small processes. One is abhyas and the other is vairag. Okay, so what is abhyas? We had already seen Ashtanga Yoga has given us a litany of things to do. Yama, niyama, pratyahara, pranayam, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. All that goes up to samadhi, the last step of any kind of abhyas or effort or yoga. Okay, we are not going into that now. But we are saying even the first steps before you go into dhyan are yam and niyam, which means that we have to practice certain things like satyam, ahimsa, brahmacharya, steya, pratyahara. Yes, that is withdrawing from sense objects and not taking what we don't deserve and being always truthful, being always calm. And niyam also means shaucham, santosh, feeling a sense of contentment because there is too much in the world, you cannot have all of it. What we have is enough. That mind shift is santosh. It comes as part of niyam. And swadhyay and tap. Swadhyay, are we doing self-study? All these are abhyasa. that Bhagwan says if you stick to this kind of practice diligently and assiduously, that means continuously giving close attention to it, I promise you, you are not going to lose your way. Yes, hundreds and thousands of people have spiritually lost their way, because even if they are lucky enough to hear the Shruti, to hear the word of truth from any of the scriptures, there is no path that they have been following, abhyas. And if they have followed it, there are more dangers ahead. We are coming to that. So he says in simple words, abhyasa, stick to it. Tell me which skill in the world has anyone picked up without abhyas? So there may be hundreds, and Yagyavalkya had said, I know so many skills. Narad had asked Yagyavalkya, I know 64 types of knowledge. What did he mean by 64? He meant 64 subjects. So geology and chemistry and biology and alchemy and logic, all the subjects he had mastered. But he still went to the master and said, no good. All these subjects have helped me in no way. What is that one knowledge I am missing? And of course, the Rishi will tell you that one knowledge we have missed out is Atma Gyan. What is my Atma Tattva? So, abhyas is needed for every kind of skill or business or profession or science or art or music, but it will not lead to Atma Gyan. That is a completely different discipline. And Vairagya. What about Vairagya? If you create a distance, I talked about all these small little tiny goals which are forever facing us, and they are so close to our face that, it's like the view is obscured and I can't see beyond it. And unless I fulfill that immediate goal of starting a new business or gaining such and such amount of wealth or marriage or children or studies, whatever, though, unless that goal is fulfilled, I am quite engrossed and involved in it. And therefore, Vairagya is important. That means you fulfill everything that is desired in this sansar, but with a sense of distance. Don't have it so close to your face that you can't see anything else. A small bit of distance, Vairagya. And that is the only second tip that Bhagwan can give. And he says, try it out, Arjun. I'm sure you can progress by leaps and bounds on your spiritual path. Now, the thing is, hundreds and thousands of people have read the scriptures, but it has been found that 99% of people go for abhyas and say, yes, I can do yagya, I can do tap, I can do japa, I can do tirtha, and I can do puja, havan, I can do all kinds of things, even swadhyay, studies, satsang. 1% goes for Vairagya. Because, why such a vast difference? Because abhyasa requires a lot of bodily involvement, and we are identified so much with the body that we think that doing anything with the body is like, yes, really, I am making progress, मैं कुछ कर रहा हूँ, मैं ये तीर्थ में जा रहा हूँ, मैं वो हवन कर रहा हूँ, मैं ये सत्संग में बैठा हूँ, मैंने इतनी किताबें पढ़ ली. It's the body and mind which is doing a lot, and we think that we are making progress. So most people go for abhyasa because it is so outward, it is so rajasic, and our nature in the world has become rajasic meaning bodily involvement in the world as a kind of ambition. But Vairagya means stilling everything and creating a distance. So Bhagwan says, don't forget, both are needed and you may do both of them. Abhyas is the net practice for the ultimate gain. Even if you do all the abhyas in the world, read all the possible Vedas and the Upanishads, and do every kind of puja archana right through the year, it doesn't matter. That's still only net practice. The ultimate game is up ahead. Your final exam is still coming up. And here we were. So number 36. Asamyatatmana yogaha dushprapa iti me matihi vashyatmana tu yatata shakyo vapto mupayataha. Bhagwan says, yes, yoga I think is hard to attain by one who is uncontrolled. The one who is uncontrolled, it is hard. But the one who is self-controlled and striving striving for the ultimate, keeping that goal in mind, yes, then it may not be so difficult. So what is the big thing about? Are you really so uncontrolled? No. We have seen Arjun, he has done 12 years of tapasya. I don't think there has been a tapasvi greater than Arjun, and he appeased Lord Shiva because of his tapasya. And out of that happiness, Lord Shiva had given him the Pashupatra Astra, that magical, all-destroying Divya Astra, that divine weapon, Pashupatra Astra, because he had been able to do 12 years of tapasya to appease Shiva. Do you think that Arjun doesn't have the capacity to do this dhyan, to do shravan, to do manan, nitidhyasanam, and find the truth about Atmagyan? It's not possible, even for a man as rajasic as he. And just like Arjun, there are people who are immensely successful in their lives and in business and profession and family and society and community. And why not? Because they have done that kind of tap. Bhagwan is saying optimistically that shows Arjun that you have the capacity for that ultimate tap and abhyas and that assiduous attention to what you're doing. Why don't you just direct it to Atmagyan? Only the subject is different. Your capacity is there, because for all our external glory, we work hard as ever. Whether it's exams or it is a job interview, or we want to have a green card in the US, we want to have citizenship in Canada, whatever it is, if that goal is set, we have the capacity to exert ourselves for some external glory. So just direct it. That determination is already in you, Arjun, and all of you. So just direct it and strive towards the supreme goal. Because when we leave this earth, none of the achievements that we have been striving for are going to be carried with us. But Atmagyan, that's one thing that you cannot lose. How is that? That's coming up. So physical disciplines, abhyas, a mental discipline, vairag, just stick to these two. And for the disciplined person, it's not difficult at all. Krishna has assured in this verse. So we have noticed that we have upgraded everything. From the first car that I had, which was just a Maruti 800 Jalopy, maybe I have a very sophisticated car now. From the first house that I owned or lived in, I have a much better house now. The mobiles that I owned 10 years ago, we have upgraded everything, if you notice. Our homes, our cars, our mobiles, our devices. We have upgraded everything except the quality of our learning, the quality of our minds. We have not upgraded. What do I mean by upgraded? By upgraded, we mean that I want those special apps in my phone. If I want an upgraded high-end Apple phone, in my mind I want Shama, self-control, Dama, sense control, Uparati, ability to withdraw from what is not important in my ultimate journey, Titiksha, complete forbearance and tolerance, Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha. I have to have faith that there is an ultimate truth, and this bhautik world of temporal reality cannot be the purpose of my life. It can't be so insignificant. That Shraddha, that the scriptures are saying the truth. I want these apps in my mind. Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, Vairagya, Abhyas. That is called upgrading the quality of life. So Bhagavan says, yes, such a disciplined mind, definitely, I assure you, you will reach your goal. And with this kind of assurance, we should feel quite assured, isn't it? But Arjun says in number 37, Arjuna uvacha ayate shraddhayopetaha yoga chalita manasaha aprapya yoga samsiddhim kam gatim Krishna gacchati. Ayate shraddhayopetaha yoga chalita manasaha aprapya yoga samsiddhim kam gatim Krishna gacchati. Arjun has a doubt. He is not assured with so much of explaining by Krishna. He has a doubt. He says, those who have faith, complete faith, yes, Krishna, you tell me that I am consciousness and my goal is to realize that. I understand. Even if I have that faith, The people who are unable to reach that, unable to control themselves and wander away and lose their way, what about them? Can they also lose their way even though they have Shraddha? So even, and 38, I'll take it together. Kachinno bhaya vibhrashta छिन्नाभ्रमिव नश्यति अप्रतिष्ठो महाबाहो विमूढ़ो ब्रह्मणः पथि कच्चिन्नो भय विभ्रष्ट छिन्नाभ्रमिव नश्यति अप्रतिष्ठो महाबाहो विमूढ़ो ब्रह्मणः पथि. And these people who, even though they have Shraddha and they believe you, I'm not saying Krishna, I don't believe you, Arjun said. Yes, I believe and I have faith and everything, and yet I fall from my high resolve of Gyan. I may even have heard Gyan, and also my karma. So even if I am doing karma, I may still fall short. So what happens to such people who fall short in both cases, in doing karma and also understanding Gyan fully, or sticking on to it, let's say. They understand it, of course, it's not difficult, but they don't have the ability to be established in that Gyan. What happens to such people? And so there is some poetic phrases used here, and that is Chinna Bhramiva Nashyati. Do I then destroy myself like some summer cloud which is rent by the wind and scatters hither and thither on a summer day? Just a white fluffy cloud on a summer day, just scattered by the wind. Chinna Bhramiva Nashyati. It's a simile used very poetically. And so what happens to such people? Yes, even if we have Shraddha, and if God has explained very clearly what our ultimate purpose is, I may still drop out. Yes, many of us drop out. We have a kind of a taste of this satsang or that satsang, or one text, another text, okay, and drop out halfway. Why? Because of insufficient drive and determination. That drive and determination, that assiduity, that satatam, which Bhagwan says, has emphasized over and over again, that makes people fail and not be able to hold on and fall again. Or they may be, I may be completely determined that I have to find out the purpose of my life and my ultimate goal, and yet if something which is so overwhelmingly desirous to my mind, it may overwhelm me, and then I drop it again. So I'm like a summer cloud that is rent by the wind and scatters in the, or Gyan, I may not be able to establish myself in it. So the one who is controlled and the one who is not abiding in that self-control, as well as the one who is uncontrolled, both are in the same boat. You know the story, I don't know what the name of the story is, but it was by Lev Tolstoy, as they call it in Russian. This story is a famous one, you must have heard it umpteen number of times. This man comes up to a farmer and says, "You can have as much land as you want." The farmer says, "Oh really? How is that?" Till that point of time, the farmer was quite santushtaha, living in a world of contentment and satisfaction and a very small piece of land. This man threw great temptation in his way and said, "Yes, you can have as much land as you want, provided you run along the edge of this farm, and as far as you can run till sundown, till sunset, as far as you can run as much as you can, and the ground that you have covered by sundown will be yours." This man was greatly tempted, naturally. All of us would be. This is what I mean. Even if you are in a quiet, controlled, santusht way, somebody comes up and throws some kind of a worldly temptation on Facebook and says, "Oh, you haven't tried this. Oh, you missed out something." So this man ran and ran till sundown, till he was exhausted. And later on, the man who had tempted him took a nice tractor, followed him. He couldn't even see him, he had reached so far. He followed his tracks and reached the end of that piece of land in his tractor, aram se. And then what did he see? He found that the man had fallen unconscious. So he bent down and wanted to revive him, but guess what? the man actually had died of exhaustion. So Lev Tolstoy is probably trying to tell us that yes, life will come to an end, but that is not debatable at all. But by the time life comes to an end, we would have been only chasing what we think is our next acquisition, and the next acquisition, and the next thing to acquire and hold and possess and hoard. And that man actually died of exhaustion. And of course, needless to say, he didn't get that huge tract of land which he had covered by running. And guess what? How much land did he need finally? So he needed land which was 3 feet by 7 feet in dimension, so that he could be buried in that. So finally, what do we need? We need only that little piece of land to be buried. So it's a very highly symbolic story, and very interesting. This Arjun says, look, I believe it, but I know that there are dropouts in life. People take up this high knowledge and then they drop out of sheer lack of determination, or there is something more tempting which makes them exhaust themselves completely till they drop dead. So how is it? I want to know the secret of really reaching this highest truth. And number 39. एतन्मे संशयं कृष्ण छेत्तुमर्हस्य शेषतः त्वदन्य संशयस्यास्य छेत्ता न ह्युपपद्यते. This doubt of mine, Krishna, Arjuna is saying, you dispel it for me as to how even a man of Shraddha and learning and Gyan can completely drop out, become a loser or a dropout. How is it? And he says, only you, Krishna. There is no one else except you, Krishna, who can dispel this doubt. Only you. What are we all looking for? Complete bliss, eternal bliss, infinite bliss. And what is Krishna the symbol of? He is the brilliant Lord of laughter and joy and bliss. So who better than Krishna to explain this highest truth of bliss? So Arjun says, I have two doubts. He has already explained. He says, it is impossible to have realization if we don't have abhyas or vairagya. We don't have that enough determination, or it is impossible anyway because we grow old and we die. And even if I start on my journey now, right now if I start on my journey, I know, Krishna, I may not be able to complete my journey towards that highest goal. So I find this an impossible goal you have set for me. So the doubts of Arjuna. So notice, in this case, notice something. Arjuna has forgotten that even a little bit of abhyas leaves a taste for it in the mind. So if we have studied a little bit of the text, all of us began in that way, reading one chapter or just listening to one phrase by some Swami somewhere years and years ago, one phrase, and we said, "Arey, ye hai kya?" A small bit of it can leave a taste for it, and you will follow it. Remember, when we drop our cravings, when we say that, okay, I'm not going to be tempted by sweets or cakes or chocolates or something, and we actually drop it from the mind, what is the reward we get? We get real good health as our reward when we drop our cravings for junk food. I'm sure all of us have grown over junk food. So our reward is healthier life. And from the mind, not from the mind itself, if you drop in dhyan, this whole chapter is about dhyan. If the mind is quietened and the mind is dropped, what is our reward? Our reward immediately is tranquility and silence and stillness. So even a little bit of it, do not disregard it and say, no, if I haven't reached the end, I'm sure I haven't fulfilled the purpose of my spiritual goal. What about when you drop the ego and you say, okay, I'm not going to be stuck on me, mine, myself, and what man and apman people do in this life. Somehow in your mind you have been able to conquer ego. Okay? What is the immediate reward? The immediate reward is that loving acceptance you get from everyone. Why? Because you have become loving and accepting of everyone. So in life we have seen these examples of having done a little bit of abhyas and tasted success. So do not disregard it. Yes, um, once we take up any of these higher, what do we call, pursuits, it could be dhyan, it could be puja in the evenings, it could be reading a text, it could be listening to a text, it could be teaching a text. Once that taste for it, because it's of a higher, more sattvic and sukshma level, what happens is the taste for all the other exciting things in the world, like exotic vacations and social dinners and jewelry and clothes and Facebook and Twitter, all these are fascinating, no doubt, but they seem to somehow lose their glamour, their glitter, their hold and their grip on us slowly, because we are attaching to something more sukshma, and that's why we call it higher. There's no moral judgment being made over here ki, oh, you're on a higher trip. No, you're not on a higher trip. It's just that the mind is being attached from the sthul, from the gross, from the material, to a sukshma and subtle tattva. That's all. That's why it's called higher. And we are capable of it. Only humans are capable of it. So he says, Etanme samshayam Krishna, I know only you, Krishna, can dispel this doubt of mine that whether I can achieve my ultimate goal. But remember, even Krishna was not willing. And you know how many years they were together as friends in childhood, and they are cousins, by the way, Arjun and Krishna, as cousins. इतने दिनों से कृष्ण ने कभी उनको ज्ञान की बात क्यों नहीं सिखाई? There was the biggest opportunity in the family कि कृष्ण, and he has the highest knowledge, अर्जुन को नहीं सिखाया. The only time Krishna has come up with the knowledge is in chapter 2, when Arjun says, Shishyaste ham tvam prapannam. I am surrendering to you. I am totally deluded. I am lost. I need guidance. Show me the way. I am lost. Unless we come to the knowledge, even Krishna will not approach us and say, here, Shravanam karo and listen to this text. No, we have to approach it. Remember, it's very, very important. So, only Krishna can reveal, but Krishna will reveal only when you ask for it. That's the whole thing. And why is it that we cannot sustain this sadhana? Even if Krishna comes and reveals it to us, we are not able to sustain it. That's the problem that Arjuna is posing here. Cannot sustain it. So, if you remember, Kabir had said, चलती चाकी देख कर दिया कबीरा रोए, चलती चाकी देख कर दिया कबीरा रोए, दो पाटन के बीच में साबुत बचा न कोई, या बाकी बचा न कोई. चलती चाकी. Chaki is a grinding stone, and the grinding stone has two parts to it. The one on top, the grinding stone, the grinder, and the one at the bottom. Now this chaki, this grinding stone has been ground all our lives. One, symbolically, the one stone stands for yoga. Yoga means the effort we make in the world to achieve this or that. Our determination and our effort to achieve all kinds of material successes and degrees and status and money and wealth and family, etc., etc. And the other stone is what? After having attained it, we want to retain it and to protect it and make sure that it's not lost. Kshema it's called. Yoga and Kshema. Yoga Kshema is the only story chakki. ये चक्की जो पीसे जा रहे हैं ना, चक्की piecing and piecing in the prison of life. It is only yoga and Kshema. K के साथ है Kshema. That is, achieve all the desirable things and then hoard them, protect them, retain them. Who wants to lose the house or the wealth or the bank account or the children? Nobody. So holding on to it is another effort. Both these efforts, Kabir says, at the end, दो पाटन के बीच में साबुत बचा न कोई. He says, दिया कबीरा रोए. He had tears in his eyes when he found that इतनी चक्की पीसने के बाद, he just saw in Banaras, he lived in Banaras, he just saw one dead body between two planks of wood being carried away. That's the final destination anyway. So, diya kabira roe. So, Bhagwan is not so pessimistic. He still has a lot of assurance and a lot of guidance for us coming up. So, hey Arjun, don't worry. Number 40. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Partha Naiveha Namutra Vinashastasya Vedyate Nahi Kalyana Krit Kasched Durgatim Tata Gachati. O Partha, neither in this world nor in the next world is there destruction. Aha! So, you cannot be destroyed. But what about all the things that you have hoarded? Oh, so Krishna says, no, we are not talking about all the material things you have hoarded. Whatever sadhana you have done, whatever sukshma tapas that you have done, that is not destroyed, neither in this world nor in the next. Because Arjun's question was, what if by old age I just die in the middle of my sadhana? So, and then Bhagwan says, Nahi kalyana krit kaschid. The one who strives to be good, he doesn't ever come to grief or to a bad end. What does he mean? What does he mean? First of all, he says, Naiveha Namutra. Not in this world, neither in this world nor in the next. Which means what? Next world means death. But we are forgetting that death is only a punctuation in a chain of lives. It's a chain. And death is only the small punctuations in between. And it is just one incident in this whole chain. Each time we die, it is just one incident. Which means that we have died several times before. That means that several times before we have left our hard-earned money and wealth and family and our beloved people and our attachments and our home and yes, our Mercedes car and everything behind because of death. Yes, we have left it behind so many times. Only thing is, yeah, thankfully we don't have a memory of it. Otherwise, we would be grieving about it even now. We would be so deluded, we would be grieving about even that. So he said, thankfully, you don't have a memory, but death is not just an arbitrary or accidental thing. You know that death occurs when your prarabdha, the bundle of experiences which you are meant to complete, exhaust in one life are over and that's the end. So it could be any nimitta matra, which means any excuse will do. It's an accident or it could be just old age or a disease or so nothing is an accident and it will happen. And your life, my dear Arjun, is a perfect continuation. So why are you worried? It's a perfect continuation of what you have been practicing. Every tapasya, every thought by thought, act by act, it's carried forward. Vinashtasya, so you're not destroyed. Na durgatim gachati. But you will not come to a bad end or to grief if you have been doing kalyan. Kalyan karoti. What does kalyan mean? Actually, in the very superficial sense, it may mean, okay, doing good for others, paropkar karo, thoda dhan dharm karo and all. But can we do dan or dharm in the real sense unless we have completely detached from our aham? So dropping that ego, and when you drop the ego, in any case you drop the krodh, because the krodh is attached to your desire, and your desire means our aham and mamatva. So the whole chain, by dropping one ego, the whole chain of grief or bad things are dropped. And therefore he says, if this kind of kalyan that you do, which means dropping the ego and therefore dropping kama, krodha, mad, lobha, moha, then I assure you, Krishna says, I assure you, just try it. You will never come to grief. Not in this life, not in the next. You will just not know grief or sorrow or disappointment or dejection or delusion or depression, despondency. Why? Because all this is attached to an ego which says, मैं, मेरा, मेरे पितामह है भीष्म, मेरे गुरु हैं द्रोणाचार्य, मेरे cousins हैं, and therefore this my thing will be dropped. And even in the 5th chapter, if you remember, Bhagwan had said, Kama krodhodbhavam vegam sayukta sa sukhi naraha. वो नर सुखी है जिसने काम क्रोध के वेग को, वेग means that violent gush, that storm of anger and desire which engulfs us, the one who has been able to bear it with fortitude, with strength, kama krodho bhavam vegam, he is a sukhi. तो ये तो 5th चैप्टर में भी बताया था, इसको कल्याण कहते हैं, जिसमें तप करने का शक्ति हो, ध्यान करने की, इंक्वायरी, साधना, स्वाध्याय, कर्मयोग, उसको कल्याण कहेंगे. वी आर डिफाइनिंग एंड रीडिफाइनिंग एवरीथिंग, although it may sound very tedious, because these words, out of being used very very loosely, become very hackneyed, and therefore they have lost their original meaning. Okay, so there is the universal law will apply. That is all that we have gained as our swabhava, whether it is towards sattvic nature or rajasic, it will carry over. That's a law, that's a universal law. So what is so difficult to understand? And durgatim tat gacchati, you will not come to anything that is grievous, which means that other people will come to grief. Yes, by inference the opposite holds true, that one who does not do all these things will come to grief. Why? Because Chinmayaji used to say that all the sins that we do, sins mean feeling, reacting to everything, and the agitation, the unnamed fears, and of course the desires which cause kama, krodh, and envy and jealousy and resentment, and judging people. He's saying all this is actually your sin. Okay, so Chinmayaji said these are sins, fine. But I am going to be punished by the sin. So what is the punishment I am going to get? Simple. The punishment we get is that we ourselves burn in our own kama, krodha, mad, lobha, moha, matsarya, envy, jealousy, materialism, and all that for lifetimes ahead. That means whatever we have practiced well, we wallow and we experience that over and over again. So he used to say, you're not going to be punished for your sins. Punishment kuch aur cheez nahi hai. You're going to be punished by the sin. By the sin means that sin will remain with you. I mean, all these which I have named are all the sins. And these will remain with you and make your life completely miserable, which it is in the case of Arjun and in many of our cases. We don't have that peace of mind. And therefore he says this misery, this wretchedness, this feeling of kripan is going to be with you. That is your punishment. So you're not punished for your sins. Arjun, you're punished by the sins. So therefore in Christianity, when we see that there is a day of judgment, okay, it is the same concept, except that they treat it as one God who is going to punish. Even in Islam, there is the day of Akhirah. Akhirah is the day of judgment, when you have to face Allah, you have to face God, and you will be punished, you will be rewarded justly for your actions. Okay, it's the same concept, Akhirah or day of judgment, and except that here we are calling it your own karma phal. See, the words may be different, the principle is the same. You cannot as a human being escape the karma phal, because those karma which we are doing are going to chase us as our own phal. And therefore it's beautifully said, we are punished not for our sins, not on judgment day some king or tyrant or God comes in and decides our destiny, but it is our own karma which comes as our karma phala. And I'm going to take a small digression to talk about Dostoevsky's book Crime and Punishment. I'm sure many of you have read it. Again, a Russian writer, Dostoevsky, and in that book there is this the protagonist who is living in abject poverty, and for some reason, I forget what it was, he commits a murder, and he's a very simple, honest, he's just a common man, and there is this murder which he has committed. And remember, he is never found out, and by the law he is never discovered, and he is never so-called punished by the law. But right through the book, it is his mind, which his mind is racked with torturous pain. He is torturing his own mind about that murder. He cannot escape his own mind, because in that mind he cannot escape the heinous crime that he has committed. Of course, this applies to people with conscience. So he had a conscience, and that mind which punished him right through his life, he would have considered any kind of prison or torture easier compared to the way his mind tortured him right through his life. And therefore this book was called Crime and Punishment. And again, a very symbolic way of saying that what we have committed will remain with us. It's not as if, it's going to be, yes, it's recorded. It's recorded in our own Karan Sharir, which is called the causal body. So Crime and Punishment was also a very symbolic book about how we punish ourselves through our own actions. What is Dhyan then? Dhyan is like cleansing all the old data. All the bad films, the videos, the bad text, the Twitter remarks and comments and all that clutter which is also in the mind. We are carrying it in our mind, what the neighbor said, how she behaved and what the boss said, and the opportunities I've lost and how someone has cheated me. My mind is also full of that clutter. That data has to be cleansed from the mobile, otherwise the mobile is going to be jammed. It's going to say no more space. How can I accommodate the highest truth? How can I accommodate the Shruti? How can I accommodate the Gyan when the mobile is so filled up with old data? So Dhyan is the only way to detox, to drain out or to delete all that old data. So when he says Naiveha Namutra, that means neither in this life nor in the next, you are going to actually, in the past, what we are today is a product of our past lives. That is understood. Bit by bit, Gyan by Gyan, action by action, thought by thought, we have built up ourselves to be where we are right now. So Krishna proceeds to explain. Prapya punyakritam lokan ushitva shashvati samaha shuchinam shrimatam gehe yoga bhrashto bhijayate. Number 41. So by the same logic that has been explained about birth and rebirth and reincarnation and about building our lives and our swabhav, by the same token of logic, it is Bhagwan is saying that you have the freedom to design even the kind of family you are going to be born in. Why? What is the logic? You will find if you have led a life of goodness but also done a lot of charity, in the next life you will find a prosperous home. A prosperous home where you don't have to struggle for your survival, because struggle for survival means I don't have time for Gyan, Tapa, Dhyan, and for the highest knowledge, for inquiry, Manan, contemplation. Where's the time? I'm struggling for my mere survival. So first step Bhagwan does is put people in prosperous, secure homes like ours, and therefore we have the freedom then to pursue Adhyatma and to pursue our higher goals. And what about, he gives one more example saying that if you have actually practiced Yagya, Tapa, Swadhyay, Dhyan sincerely, if you have been practicing this, then by your own karma you will also get a birth in a home of actually wise people, wise parents, meditative parents. Not just prosperous, but people who are wise and meditative. Why? Because that's one step higher, and you will get a head start. A head start ahead for your journey of Vivek, Vairagya and Swadhyay and Moksha, because that is the journey. And towards Moksha you will get a head start, and therefore to give you that head start you choose your own homes, and that's how you make your progress. What about Arjun? Arjun, remember, you are already born in a prosperous, you are already a prince and a princely family where there's nothing lacking, and you had the best teachers. So the best teachers have also given you the Gyan. That means he has also studied philosophy and also archery. So Arjun, you are already in a very fortunate position to gain this Gyan, just like all of us. Remember, we are like Arjun and we have that opportunity, and also in the next life we get these the kind of homes that are conducive for our own spiritual growth. So what is the Lord then persuading Arjun to do? He is persuading him to start storing up his sadhana, to start storing up his his thirst for Gyan and not for wealth and achievements. Don't start storing up all that, he says. But there are some things which are very hard to get on this planet. What are those? Number 42. अथवा योगिनामेव कुले भवति धीमताम् एतद्धि दुर्लभतरं लोके जन्म यदीदृशम्. Durlabhataram means very, very durlabh, very, very hard for us to have human birth. Durlabhataram loke janma. Yes. A birth like this. No, not only human janma, but a birth like this. So Arjun, you're already in a very fortunate position and a prosperous home with teachers, and it is very rare. Remember, it's very rare. We can see that around us. There are so many hundreds of people. Many of them do not even know that there is something called a higher truth, something beyond these material goals and achievements. And if they don't know about it, how can they seek it? We can see that. At least we have come to a point of seeking, Arjun and us. And that Krishna has assured us is very, very rare. Consider ourselves fortunate. Leave alone a family of a Jnani, leave alone being born in a prosperous family or a family of a Jnani or a wise man. It's even quite difficult to be born a human being. This we have found in another text called Vivek Chudamani by Shankaracharya. He says there are 6 things which are very, very hard, and if you have these, you can consider yourself really fortunate. What are the 6? Bank balance, jewelry, family, study abroad. No. So it is Manushya Janma, very rare. I am quoting from Vivek Chudamani, a text by Shankaracharya. Manushya Janma, very rare. It is only in this Janma we can achieve the highest. Second, Purushatva. In that human birth, to have Purushatva. Purushatva means to have the qualities of mind control, of sense control, of Gyan, of Manan, Chintan, have the stability for Dhyan, Swadhyay, Santosh, Shat Sampatti, you know, Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titisha. All these, I don't know how many we have or to what extent, but Shankaracharya has said, as human beings, even if we are born human beings, we can still be at quite an animal level if we don't have this Purushatva. Third, Sattvic life. Very hard to have the Sattvic life where you have an environment where you can practice your Swadhyay, teaching, learning, and Dhyan. Not many people have that opportunity, Sattvic, the thirst to live a Sattvic life, because we are all become very Rajasic, very ambitious, extroverted, and sense-oriented. Okay. Next thing is very hard to get in this life is Shruti of Ved, which we are getting right now. Shruti means the words of scriptures of the Ved. When do we get to hear it? Only when the opportunity comes. We find a text, we find someone to talk about it, we can listen to it. You know how many thousands and millions who are there who have not opened that text or any text. I'm not talking of only Gita, any text or even a Shankaracharya, which is a supporting text, and not leaf through it. They're not aware of it or not interested in it or no thirst for it. So even this thirst, this desire and this opportunity to open the Vedantic text, Shruti of Ved, is but rare. These are Shankaracharya's words. And what is also tough, next one, very tough. Sat and Asat ke beech mein Vivek. That comes with Gyan. Ki Sat kya hai, Asat kya hai. All that which is Asat is temporary, transient, temporal and ephemeral in this world. But to really live as if I know that this is Asat and not get attached is a very rare quality. That is called Vivek. Asat and Sat के बीच का विवेक और discernment, discrimination बहुत rare है, even in human beings. So human beings बन भी गए तो उनमें पुरुषत्व कितने में है, यानी कि the subtle intellect, subtlety इतनी subtle कि हम सूक्ष्म ज्ञान को समझ सके, उसमें सात्विकता कितनी है कि शमदम उपरति, mind control, sense control. श्रुति और वेद सुनने की opportunity, to listen to the scriptures, where is the opportunity? Very rare. To see the distinction very clearly between permanent, impermanent, Vivek, even rarer among human beings. And the rarest of them, of course, Aham Brahma Asmi. That human being who realizes, like Surdas or Kabir or Raman Maharshi or Ramakrishna or Vivekanandi, that I am that Tattva, Aham Brahma Asmi, completely merged with that consciousness. That is the rarest of it all. So, human birth itself is rare, and following that, we have to make sure that we don't become a rare species among the human beings, and we move up the ladder. So, spiritual inquiry and meditation and contemplation, Bhagwan has made out a very strong case for us. In fact, even Ram had asked his guru, Rishi Vashishta was his guru. Bhagwan Ram asked, what are the steps that I should take? What is a procedure for me to go up this ladder? And Yog Vashisht had said very simply, yes, for moksha you just have to start with Shravan, listen, Manan, Nitidhyasanam, abide in it. So, listening, contemplation, abidance, and then also having control over the senses. So, Shravanam, Manam, Nitidhyasanam, these are all the steps. Which of these can we get in the material world? None of these we can get from the material world. All these are available only with us and through us. So, we are going to see on this earth, I am quite convinced, yes, this is the path and I am going to go for it. But if my body drops and my prarabdha finishes and I die, do I lose out on this whole pursuit? How? Then I am going to have to start all from square one. Arjun's doubt is still persisting. We are going to see this tomorrow. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Thank you.